Hi, this is Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens, where I talk about art and design and fountain pens. You don't have to be an artist, of course, to get something out of this channel, but you do have to like fountain pens. We are getting really close to getting 1,000 subscribers. So if you're getting anything out of this channel, please click on the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's a great way to support the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a very popular pen and I think a very interestingly designed pen, the Muji fountain pen. Interestingly, right now you can't get it on Muji's own website, but you can get it on Amazon, and it sort of appears on the Muji website and then disappears. So I don't know what the status of that is, but anyway, it is around $17, and I think it's a very good value, but it's quite controversial. A lot of people don't like this pen, but I think it's very interesting from a design perspective. The Muji fountain pen seems to date back to the early teens, at least in the United States. The pen comes only in one nib size, which is fine. There's people seem to say on the web that they think that the nib is actually made by Schmidt. It says on the nib that it's an iridium nib, but it has no branding. And that is the really interesting thing about Muji. They don't really put their name on things, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. When you get the pen, it comes in this very simple plastic sleeve. It doesn't even come in a box. And I got it on Amazon. As I said, it wasn't available right now on the Muji's own website. It comes in this very simple plastic sleeve, which has a little instruction booklet in it. So it's very, very bare bones, and it goes along with a very simple aesthetic. When you get the pen inside, there's one international style cartridge. The cap comes on and off in a pleasant click. So it's like that, and it then slips back on, and it goes into this channel. I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a channel in here, and it slips into that. So it's very pleasant, very nice the way it comes together, and then it also posts in the same way. So it posts very securely, and that's a very nice design. I think they kind of got that from a Lamy pen. This is the Linea pen, and you can see how close it is actually in size. There is a silver. I don't have that one, but this is, I think, really nice the way it has this grid. But they also had a Linea pen. This dates back to at least 2006, 2007. So Lamy was there first, and this is more like a $40 pen, while this is a $17 pen. I think it's a very nice pen, and I think it really is the inspiration for the Muji pen. Anyway, they both have the same kind of cap that clips to the top. I mean, that goes onto the top. It makes the clicking sound and also then fits on the bottom. It's slightly different mechanism, but I think there's a kind of similar effect. The difference, of course, with the Muji pen is this knurled section, which is quite long. You pull it out and you can see here, well, here again, also the section here, which is a good grip. And so you don't hold the pen right up against where it kind of steps up. And here is the part that you hold the pen and very securely in your hand. So it's not slippery. And that's different from the Lamy pen, which has a plastic section that is kind of ribbed. So, and it's a little bit small, I think, for holding in your hand. So anyway, there's a bit of an inspiration there. Now, some people find the neural metal to be uncomfortable. I like it, as I say. I find metal pens are often slippery, so I actually think that's nice. The top and the bottom have a round shape design, so that kind of reinforces the round tubular form of the pen as a whole, which is nice. I think it's a very nice looking pen, but I should also point out that in terms of the material or the feel of the pen, it has a kind of coarseness to the finish. It doesn't feel expensive, and some people might not like that about it. It looks really beautiful, but when you touch it, it has a kind of coarseness to the way in which the machinery has been done, I think. And that's very different, of course, from the Lamy pen, which wasn't, this pen is not a super expensive pen, but it has a kind of luxuriousness to it. I got this pen for around $40 on eBay. I'm not sure how much it listed for, but considerably more than, I'm sure, than the $17 that it costs for the Muji pen. You can definitely use the pen with a converter if you find the right converter that's going to work with the nib. It has to be a converter, an international style converter that has a kind of tight hole. Otherwise, it'll fall out. I have heard that Pelikan, in particular, their converters seem to work well with it. But here's the problem. The way in which the cap fits into this channel creates a problem with ink. The ink, if you dip the pen into ink the way you would normally fill a converter, ink will go into this channel and it's very hard to get it out. So you can't fill a converter the traditional way of sticking the nib into the ink and using a converter in that way. You still could use a converter, but you really have to fill it with a syringe if you're going to do that. In other words, the pen is really designed to be a cartridge pen and not for work with a converter, but you can get it to work with a converter if you use a syringe. Now, in terms of design, Muji, the word Muji actually stands for brandless or no brand quality goods. That's the idea of the whole Muji company, is to make really beautiful things, objects, but not to push advertising or to even advertise that much, and to almost create a kind of generic quality or simple quality that also one tends to associate with things that are designed in Japan, a kind of minimalism, right? And indeed, in that tradition, the pen has no identifiable branding on it. All the words that it has on it are on the nib that say fine on it and iridium, but it doesn't even say, that it's made in Japan, right? So that's part of it. And that reminds me sort of the 1980s, in which there was introduced into supermarkets goods that just said cornflakes or beer or cola. I kind of like that, and black type on a white box. There was something both cool about it and strangely surreal about it.
America's drinking 7-Up, and it sure feels right. Feeling lucky 7.
Kevin, stop singing, man.
Huh? I was a singing guy.
But it also brings up all kinds of questions about what would a generic fountain pen kind of look like. I discussed some of those issues with my review of the Lamy Aeon pen and the designer Jasper Morrison's idea of what he called super normal. The idea was to come up with a pen design that could be mass-produced, functional, and sort of discreet, and yet sort of fit well in your hand and still have a certain quality of personality. The term minimalism is often used to refer to such design concepts, and I talked a little about minimalism in my review of the recently released Pelikan Ineo pen. So here is the Pelikan Ineo pen, which I think you can see relates to the Muji pen, and a little more elaborately designed Aeon pen. This is the one that was designed by Jasper Morrison and is a bit more tapered and more like a Parker Duofold, actually. So, what constitutes a pen that is functional and even looks generic? And of course, the other thing is that you can make your pen generic, but you want to attract your customer. And it's interesting to me that both the Ineo pen and the Aeon pen are made out of a material that is shiny and sort of catches your eye, while there is I think the Muji pen is even more understated. It's not as flashy as these two pens. But I think it's a mistake to confuse minimalism with being inexpensive, although the Muji pen is certainly inexpensive, and the Pelikan pen is not very expensive. The Aeon pen is kind of moderate priced, $70. So you really got something like $30, $17, $70. But it's a mistake to think, well, minimalist aesthetic means cheap, because recently I watched a review of the Design 8 pen, which is designed by Mark Braun for Otto Hutt, that retails somewhere near $1,000. I don't own one of these pens, but I was struck by how it looked something like the Lamy Linea pen, or a little bit like the Hung Dian Black Forest pen, or another pen that comes to mind that is the Jinhao 35 pen. These are all pens that I kind of call stick pens. They almost, in some cases, like the Linea pen and the Muji pen, they don't taper at all. And then in these other cases, there's only the slightest sign of tapering, meaning that the pen sort of undulates a little bit and accommodates your hand. In the case of the Muji pen, it's just round tube, right? And so I think of it like a stick pen. And in some ways, the design is going back to the very beginning of writing, when people wrote with a stick or a stylus into a clay tablet, right? And they go all the way back to that. I think unconsciously, at least, they're thinking about that. More recently, of course, I think there is the pencil, which, after all, is round and doesn't taper. Now, there's one thing, though, about a pencil that makes it comfortable, or even it's true of a Bic stick pen, is that it's very, very light. And I note that in the reviews of the Otto Hutt Design 8 pen, there were a lot of complaints about how incredibly heavy that pen is. And of course, its materials are very luxurious and beautifully crafted, and it has supposedly a gorgeous gold nib that is just wonderful to write with. So I'm not saying that, it's made out of the same materials as the Muji pen. And yet there is this sort of idea that the essence of a pen is that it's a kind of round, stick, pencil-like form, and that if you go towards the idea of a traditional cigar-shaped pen, this is the Pilot 743, right? Pen like this, that after all fits your hand, that somehow you're getting away from the essence of what a pen really should be like in its fundamental form, going back all the way back into time, right, to writing instruments that were like sticks, right? This is a much more sophisticated, maybe ergonomic shape, but a fussier shape. And there's something elegant and straightforward about these round, tubular, simple pens that continues to appeal. The question is, do you have to pay $1,000 for that? The cheapest pen here, I think, is the Jinhao 35, which is actually quite elegant looking, and I think I got for under $10. And of course, the pencil is very inexpensive. But there's one thing that all of these pens, maybe with the exception of the Aeon, have in common is they're all very light when you hold them. And the lighter the pen is when it takes this form, or the pencil, the less you mind how it fits in your hand. And as the pen gets heavier, I think it needs to be tapered and shaped more. I think the cigar shape works better for that. I don't, as I say, I don't have the Auto Hut pen, but I do have several pens that are very literally seem like pencils. Here's one that comes to mind. Let me take this away. This is the Kaweco Special Pen. I think it's really, really beautiful pen. And it's, obviously meant to emulate a pencil, but it's pretty heavy and it gets tiring a bit when you write with this pen. The same thing is true, I think, too, of the Monteverdi one-touch tool pen. This is a really funny pen. It works as a stylus, and it has a little screwdriver, and it's a ruler, and obviously it's meant to look like a pencil, but it's quite heavy, and you really can't use it to write. I don't think it's good for writing for a long period of time. So if you're going to do a pen that is very simple in its form, in its tubular form, I think then it has to be very light. So what does it weigh? Well, with the cap, it's 22 grams. In comparison, the pencil is 5 grams. Without the cap, it's under about 18 grams. In comparison, the Kaweco Special is 30 grams, so it's 8 grams more. Supposedly the Auto Hut pen that I was talking about is 50 grams, which is just almost crazy. Size-wise, the pen is 5.5 inches when it's capped. When you post it, it's 6.25 inches, which is a good size. Now, so far, I have not mentioned the nib of the Muji. It only comes in fine, and people say it's made by Schmidt. It's a number 5 nib, and it's friction fitted and easily removed. The surprising thing about the nib is that it has a bit of flex to it, and I think it is particularly good for sketching. However, if you like a broader nib, I found it was easy to swap the nib for a number 5 Jovo nib that I got from Goulet Pens. In conclusion, I really like the way the pen looks. It is very elegant looking, and I think in terms of the formal design, it's much more a work of art than a lot of European pens with fancy gold nibs, flashy ornament, and exotic materials. At just $17, it's a good buy, particularly for sketching with its native fine nib. My biggest criticism is the way the cap fits into the pen makes it difficult to fill a converter in the traditional way, although once you know about this issue, it's not a big deal to fill the converter with a syringe or just use cartridges. Looks aside, it's not the most comfortable pen, even though it is light, and I think that has to do with the cheapness of the finish and the way it is somewhat coarsely brushed metal it actually feels in the hand. But if you're someone who wants to look cool when you write, this is the pen for you. And I think it also looks cool on a very, minimal designed desk. Unlike a lot of the Chinese pens, let's say, for example, the Jinhao 35, or I think in particular the Black Forest Hongdian, you don't feel that this pen is, you know, an expensive pen that you got for a bargain price. It feels cheap in the hand. The Hongdian Black Forest, when you get it, and it's a comparable price, really feels like a very substantial pen, and it also is beautifully designed. So I wouldn't say that, you know, this is my favorite budget price pen for that reason, and yet I do like it and think it is a good pen in my collection. So I'm going to do a writing sample, and I will do a drawing. As always, please subscribe if you found this discussion useful. So how does it write? It's the Muji Fountain Pen. And they call this a fine nib. And it is black cartridge that comes with it. And this is rhodia paper. And I think this is a fairly pleasant nib for fine. It's fairly wet. And this is the big surprise. It's not a nail. We can tell that, but it has a bit of flex. Not a lot, but a bit. I mean, you don't want to, it's not meant to be a flex nib, but it has a little bit of give to it, which is really nice. And it doesn't skip. A lot of writes quickly. I guess some people like reverse writing. It doesn't really do reverse writing. So the nib that comes with it is okay. But if I'm going to write in a journal, I find this a little too fine. So I have another one of the pens, and I have put a Goulet Jovo nib into it. And so just to show you that, this is the Muji Fountain Pen. I've put a converter into it, but you can't, this is really important to keep in mind, if you're going to use it with a converter, you have to fill the converter separate from the pen because it's not designed really to use a converter. And when you stick the pen into the ink well, the ink gets caught in the channel here, and that is a disaster. So you really, if you're going to use a converter, you're going to have to use a syringe to fill it. Or if you can use, you could use a cartridge, an empty cartridge, and fill it that way if you want to use a different color ink. Anyway, this is Waterman Absolute Brown and rhodia paper, obviously. And this nib, which I got, as I say, from Goulet, is very smooth. It's broad, very wet. And now it's really a delightful pen. I love the way the pen looks. And with the broad nib, I think it's really nice. So that adds another $15 to the price of the pen. So altogether, this would be a $32 pen, which isn't too bad.